Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for the next installment of the Rocky Mountain MyRec Short Takes on Suicide Prevention podcast. I'm your host, Adam Hoffberg, and joining us today we have a very special guest coming to us from the Veterans Treatment Courts system, and I'm here with Joseph Ellis. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. So as you know, we're pretty informal around here. Is it okay if I call you Joe for the podcast?
Actually, I prefer Joseph. I was Joe in another life and took on the name Joseph when I went through treatment myself, and so it represents kind of a new beginning for me. So I kind of prefer Joseph. I know it sounds formal, and I get kind of taken aback when people call me Joe now because I'm like, oh, we're familiar, but I prefer Joseph. I think that's kind of the persona I'm with now.
Great. So Joseph, welcome. I think that's a great segue into just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to arrive in this line of work.
Well, it's kind of a long story. Do you have some time?
Yep, we got time.
Sit back.
I'm relaxed. I'm ready.
I've lived. I feel like I've lived a couple different lives. In another life, I was a graphic designer. I worked for a subsidiary of Hallmark out of Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, and that was kind of a cool gig. I loved it. I got a lot of exposure to the marketing world. I have a master's degree in marketing and advertising, and so that was another life, and kind of led me into. That's where I kind of began to struggle with my own demons, I guess, battle with some depression, some major depression. The thing about it is I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know. I didn't know that that's not what normal life looked like. And so kind of fumbled my way into what they call substance use disorder or addiction. The word addiction is kind of frowned upon. We try to use different terminology now that's not so demeaning, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I kind of fell into my battle with depression. I started having some physical pain issues come up, and growing up I was kind of a teetotaler. Didn't really drink, didn't really experiment with drugs, and actually got some weird sideways looks in certain circles. They're like, you don't drink, you don't smoke or anything like that, and I was fine to say I didn't. And then started having some physical pain issues, sought some help, and of course this was back before what we come to know as the opioid crisis, and was prescribed medications, and I think it really evolved into using those medications to more deal with the emotional issues that I was having rather than the physical pain. I think the two were related, the physical and the emotional, but I found that the medication I was given for physical pain helped me tolerate my in-laws better, helped me tolerate work.
Right.
Conflict, helped me not feel some of the symptoms of depression, and then it kind of evolved, from as it does through dependency into addiction, where it really disrupts life, and so I systematically kind of handed my life over in all facets to using opiates, and then. Like I said, systematically started losing all the good things in my life. I had everything I wanted at about the age of 25. Had a beautiful family, was married to a good woman. I worked for great companies like Hallmark Cards and Remington Arms, doing really, really cool things. But all that stuff didn't really come to be actualized because I fell into depression and substance use. It was a real, I don't know if you're familiar with Dante's Inferno, but I went through the different rings of hell, mm-hmm. And denial, and a lot of the cognitive distortions that I had that were reinforced by my military service in the Army, they just helped me to fall more and more to a place I never realized that I could go. So it got pretty dark, I went from having great jobs, a wife, and 4 beautiful kids that are the best of me, to systematically handing everything over to this disorder, and living on a mattress in my dad's basement, and really contemplating for the first time ending it all as a solution to this problem, and that's somewhere that I never thought I could go. So it was this realization that I had to make a choice. I hate to quote movies too much anymore, but there's a line from Shawshank Redemption that states, get busy living or get busy dying. And that's kind of where I was at. I was like, man, I feel like I have 2 choices. I'm at a crossroads. It's either continue dying physically, emotionally, and spiritually, or try to find what life's on the other side of this. So I came to Colorado, went to a pretty hardcore treatment center called Stout Street Foundation, and it saved my life. It really helped me to uncover some of the thinking and the behavior that really helped me get into this dark place. It helped me uncover things and realize that my thinking was the problem. That caused the heavy-duty feelings that I was dealing with, and out of that came behaviors that I never thought I would engage in. And so going through treatment helped me realize again who I was, helped me get back to the good things that I like about my character, about myself, my strengths. And so it helped me to kind of, it was kind of a crawl, walk, run kind of a deal. It's a long-term program. It's 24 months. There's 18 months in-house residential treatment where you go through a period of orientation for 30 days. And then you get into first phase where you're exposed to these different psychoeducational classes in groups that they call reality therapy games that really delve into, it helped me to realize that I was my biggest problem and that I was the solution to my own problem. And that's the level of treatment that I needed. I had gone through different episodes and of treatment, and it didn't help. So it was really the tidal wave of truth that I needed, and so I was desperate. I grabbed onto it, latched onto it, ran with it, tried to do everything I could to make myself better. And that engagement, which, now being a certified addictions counselor, helped me to realize, one of the things I've noticed is that one of the biggest predictors of whether or not you're going to stay in long-term recovery or relapse and go back to that life is your willingness to do whatever it takes to change. And that's where I was. So I grabbed onto everything that would feed me. I was hungry for all this stuff. So these psychoeducational classes are set up in a way that they kind of build on each other. They teach you coping skills. They teach you how to deal with anger management. They teach you how to deal with your maladaptive schemas, which is a big word for essentially looking at the world through a certain set of distorted glasses that you have, realizing where it came from, and then taking that and flipping it 180 degrees and going to what I call the super balance. I actually teach that class now because that was my spiritual awakening, if you will. That was where I kind of realized that I have the power and have had the power the whole time, my whole life, to live the life that I deserve. And so now it's my passion to kind of teach that to other folks and hopefully afford them that same spiritual awakening. So I went through treatment. I was able to get gainful employment again, and started growing this network of friends in recovery, of people who were also living a life, of not using and finding their best life. And like I said, that hunger really hasn't gone anywhere. It's just grown. It's kind of like a snowball going downhill. The bigger it gets, the more momentum it builds. And so one of the biggest things I've learned is that I can't have a big enough network. And so going through that, I was working in the addictions field, actually working for Stout Street Foundation on their business development side, and then was afforded the opportunity to become a mentor in the 18th Judicial District in Arapahoe County. And it was kind of there. I was doing addictions counseling at Stout Street, but it was there, and it was that door opening that I realized, hey, there's an entire microcosm of folks out there, of veterans that are dealing with substance use disorder in conjunction with their mental health stuff and their trauma from the military that need the same things that I needed. And so worked with a couple mentees out there, some real hard-headed dudes that I was able to relate with because I was that hard-headed dude, and when I was telling them things that I thought were pearls of wisdom, I was talking to myself at the same time, and so working there, I was there for a couple years under the tutelage of Todd Kramer. He's the peer mentor coordinator out there. Same thing that I do in the 1st Judicial District. The state sort of realized, hey, this is a need. This mentor program is huge. It's really helping folks in the process of recovery, of getting back to the life that they deserve. This mentor program is really a key portion of it, and Veterans Treatment Court is the only one of these problem-solving courts that we have that affords folks mentors, and the role of a mentor is essentially, I say, walking next to somebody as they go through this.
Right.
Just being there, we educate, we empower, and we keep these guys on the right track. We just let them know, hey, I'm here. I'm not in front of you pulling you along. I'm not behind you pushing you. I'm standing right beside you, just like we did in the military. And so whatever happens to you happens to me. We're going to walk through it. And so it's that companionship, I think, that really makes the Veterans Treatment Courts successful. I was able to travel to Buffalo, where the first Veterans Treatment Court was started there, and meet some of those guys. Jack O'Connor, who was really the first guy who really did what we do, and he kind of pioneered this system that has had great success. And so I was able to travel out there and talk to Jack and go through some training with them, sit through their court and see how Judge Russell keeps things going. They've been going for around 10 years now, and wow. I mean, what we do here in Colorado, they do on a much, much larger scale. On a typical docket day, in our world, we'll see maybe 8 to 10 clients. On a heavy day, it gets, around the 18, 20 range. But I was sitting in court, and they let the vets in for their court in Buffalo, and this line of former service members just walked through, and there must have been 30, 35, maybe 40 people just filed through, and they just filled up the courtroom, and I was like blown away. So they do what we do on a much, much larger scale. They've refined it, and they are refining it, and so I try to stay in touch with Jack as much as I can, and kind of see what they're doing, and try to emulate that here.
Well, I really want to dive into that some more in just a moment, but first I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story as part of this because, as you mentioned, you're beside these guys, and you have been there in many ways, and so I really appreciate that and for you coming in today. As we get into the topic a little bit more, I just want to make sure that folks are familiar with a little bit more about what the idea behind veterans treatment courts are, and then we can talk a little bit more, as you were mentioning, about what the flow looks like and how you all are modeling your program. Sounds like somewhat off of Buffalo. So could you start us just kind of at the beginning? You said maybe the first veterans treatment court was about a decade ago. What was the goal here, and how is it set up?
It's I want to say offshoot. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's an offshoot of drug courts, which have been around for quite a while. I don't want to misspeak and say a certain number of years,
Sure.
But they've been around a lot longer than Veterans Treatment Court. But it's essentially, they've recognized that there are hundreds of thousands of veterans in the U.S. They come back home. They have a problem assimilating back to life in the civilian world because the military is great at teaching us how to be in the military, but not so much teaching us how to not be in the military anymore. The things that they teach us in the military, they help you to excel and exceed and do well in the military lifestyle. But then when you come home and you're a civilian again, those things don't necessarily fit. It's like a square peg in a round hole. You're trying to figure out, why isn't everybody else's life structured like mine? Why can't they toe the line? The things I've taught help me succeed, and you try to put those into the civilian world, and it doesn't necessarily fit. So it's that I've kind of rattled off and forgotten. Veterans Treatment Court. You want to talk about the structure of it? Yeah.
So it's very helpful to think that this is modeled off sort of a drug treatment court where I guess the goal is to keep people out of jail, right? I mean, to some extent.
Right, and that's Thanks for leading me back there, man. I'm old and had a lot of blows to the head.
But it's good to think of all that background. So I actually am.
They recognize that there's a cycle of guys coming home that can't assimilate, and they get into legal trouble, mm-hmm. because it's mostly because of their mental health stuff that they're dealing with, because of their service, things of that nature that are hindering them, but they don't even realize it. Kind of like my story. They get in trouble with the justice system. And then the cycle just continues, and incarceration's not a treatment, it doesn't really treat the problem. It's not getting to the root of it, it's kind of perpetuating it. So, sometimes these folks, they come home and they get in trouble and it's like this cycle that they don't know how to get out of. I heard one judge talk about how you do life in jail 30 days at a time. Which kind of, helped me to kind of understand that the cycle just perpetuates itself. And so, there's a teaching and treatment need there, but keeping these guys in incarceration or DOC, community corrections, is not helping the problem, right? A lot of times people just learn how to be better criminals, which is, it's not helping the problem. So to get to the root of the issue, it's an opportunity to identify what these guys are struggling with. I say guys, I apologize. What these folks are struggling with, because we have men and women in the courts the same. Trauma is a huge one. You in the military. In the scope of your service, you see things that civilians couldn't understand, couldn't imagine sometimes, and trying to that's got to go somewhere, that stuff needs to be dealt with, or it just festers, and so it feeds the mental health issues, So getting them the treatment that they need, giving them the opportunity to deal with those demons. I'm doing air quotes, but getting them to deal with the issues at the root level helps them to get out of this cycle. And so that's what drug courts, that's what veteran treatment court is all about. Specifying. The difference between a drug court and the veterans treatment court is just the treatment is specifically for veterans. It's vet specific treatment. Mm-hmm. It's getting them connected to the VA if they have the right status, the right discharge status. It's finding the resources in the community that they can plug into if their discharge status keeps them from going to the VA. And that's when I talked about not being able to have a big enough network. That's one of the things that I try to focus on is staying hungry for the next piece of information, trying to meet the next person that can lead me to the next chunk of information. This is there's a huge network of just a spider web of resources out there of people that want to help. Mm-hmm. I think the last statistic I heard on one of my favorite podcasts, Mandatory Fun, was that there's 45,000 and counting different nonprofits that are vet specific right now, and they just keep going. They just keep growing. Mm-hmm. There's so many out there that it's impossible to keep up with them, and so finding those relevant resources that are near and around us is kind of the I guess the little puzzle that I like to put together. It's integral to getting these guys the treatment that they need, these folks the treatment that they need, especially if they're cut off from the VA or if there's a delay in their treatment with the VA, and they might be in a position of crisis or they might need help now. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that in our court where they might have an appointment in the next 3 weeks to deal with a specific issue, but they need help now. They're going through the same thing I was. They're thinking about, really permanent solutions to temporary problems that they don't even need to consider.
Right.
And it's, part of the cognitive distortion that I said was reinforced through the military is that sacrifice for the greater good piece. Put it away, deal with it later. Strength is barreling through something, depriving yourself of sleep if need be. You don't eat until everybody else eats, kind of thing. And these are basic needs that we have as human beings. But in the military, the mentality is you sacrifice for the greater good, and that's all well and good until you get out into the civilian world and it's just you, and then you may have a complete lack of knowledge about self-care, how to take care of yourself, because you're so used to, making sure all your troops are fed before you eat, mm-hmm. Pushing through, and denying what your basic needs are, to the point where you don't know how to feed yourself. You don't know how to, and I say feed, but I don't just mean literally.
Right.
I mean figuratively.
Feed the soul.
Yeah,
feed the body,
feed yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
These are huge things. The military is great on teaching you how to take care of yourself. Doing your PT and staying at that top level of performance physically. But I don't ever remember a commander or platoon sergeant ever telling me, "Hey, make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you have your me time. Make sure you do some mindfulness or some grounding or whatever you need to do to take care of you, because you really can't take care of your troops well if you're not good." I don't ever remember that being taught. Maybe it is now. Maybe things are evolving, and that's my hope.
Sure.
But in my experience, that was not the case.
Yeah, that's really some tremendous insight into, like you said, getting at some of these root cause type things and how challenging the transition out of the military can be. And so, could you talk us through? You mentioned kind of the veterans that are getting into the Veterans Treatment Court. What kind of things are they going through? What kind of issues are they facing, and what kind of cases are you all seeing?
Well, A lot of the folks that we see aren't. They're not folks that are like immediately transitioning out of their service, whether it's active duty, reserve, guard, whatever it is. They're not. These are folks. One of the things I've noticed is that there's years of lag time between their separation from the military and then when we find them. Because I think that mentality of suck it up and drive on keeps them from reaching out for the help that they need sooner rather than later, and it finally gets to a point where they're in trouble with the law and the consequences have become so great that they have to face these things. That's kind of what I've noticed in our courts. Some of the guys have been separated. Some of the folks have been separated 4 or 5, maybe 10 years, maybe even Vietnam era. And they've been trying to deal with these things on their own for so long that it's become this giant monster that's just overtaking them, and they're forced to deal with it when they land in the justice system. So there's everything from people having their first DUI to much greater heavier charges, felony level stuff that probably never should have happened had these folks had the treatment that they needed along the way and reached out for it. Mm-hmm. That pride piece and I can do it myself piece, I think is what is causing that lag time between their separation and when we see them in the courts.
Yeah.
So.
So now, you mentioned you're a peer mentor. What does that role look like? And tell us a little bit about it. And maybe, I feel like it's so helpful sometimes when we bring it to something specific while also respecting 100% confidentiality and people's privacy. But is there opportunity here to tell us a little bit about how you act as a peer mentor and, what that role looks like in every day?
Sure. I don't know if you're familiar with the term battle buddy. Everybody, you don't do anything alone in the military. They train you, in basic training. If you're gonna go to the latrine, you take your battle buddy, and you just get used to counting on that person beside you. Mm-hmm. And that person's got your back and you've got their back, whether you have personal issues with them or not, they're on the same team as you. And so it's essentially like that, at a fundamental level, it's essentially being their battle buddy. It's like I said, the companionship piece is the biggest part. We're focusing a lot on training and getting them involved in peer recovery coaching, higher level, I guess you'd say recognized and certified training as sort of a standard. But at the end of the day, that companionship is the biggest piece. Just being there. I'm a vet. I see that you're struggling. I'm your battle buddy. What you're going through, I'm going through, and I'm going to stand beside you until we get on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. So does that kind of flesh out?
Yeah, that actually is really helpful. And I wonder is that some of the same language you'll do when you're introducing yourself to these guys and gals when you meet them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of difficult actually. I talked about that lag time and people between separation and when they find themselves in the courts. They've kind of become accustomed in that time to taking care of things on their own. So a lot of times there's this almost an aversion to the peer mentor role. We have about 10 really active peer mentors in our court, and these are folks that are there every week. And we end up pairing them up individually, like one-on-one. And I've noticed that folks in our court will really almost have to be forced into realizing that this is a person they can trust, a person that's there to help. There's this trust factor that has to be gained, mm-hmm. And a lot of times it starts with that relational piece, introducing them, getting them used to, maybe sending a text every couple of days and saying, "How are you? You good? Is there anything I can do for you?" Just letting them know, "Hey, I'm here."
Right. And you mentioned like part of it is you're connected to this network of resources, and you're help kind of bridging some of the gaps in terms of sort of helping find the resources that are relevant for that person.
Right. Absolutely. And that's part of what my role is as a peer mentor coordinator, is making sure that I'm on top of my game when it comes to resources that are relevant around us, and being able to communicate those to my mentors, which I kind of look at as my platoon, my squad, my people.
I see. So you're the coordinator for the other mentors.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's helpful.
Yeah, and so I'm responsible for training them, for retaining them, and helping them make sure that they have all the tools that they need in their toolkit to be successful and to feel like they're doing something beneficial. Because these mentors aren't paid; they're volunteer. Mm-hmm. They do it out of the goodness of their heart because they have a heart for other vets, and so obviously they're going to run into trouble with them. Throughout their process, they're going to struggle with knowing what's the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure that they know. You just be there. Just be there. If you don't have a solution, that's fine. Just let them know I'm here and you're being heard. But part of my role as a peer mentor coordinator that I take very seriously is making sure that I know the resources that are available and relevant, and then I educate the mentors on that, and so that they have this. They have a good, firm understanding of what's out there, so that they can, I guess, feel like confident in that they can speak knowledgeably about these resources. So I want to make sure that they know all the resources that I know, and if they don't, they know they can come to me, and I can say, hey, maybe this will help. Maybe this will help. Maybe we should connect them with Stephen A. Cohen Clinic.
Sure.
And so just keeping on top of those resources, that's a huge part of it, because, like I talked to you before we started recording, 98% of the resources that are out there, and I just pulled that number out because it helps me visualize the vast number of resources that are out there, they don't know about. They know about
Right.
the VA. A lot of these guys have run into problems connecting with the VA because of their discharge status. And so they assume, well, there's no resources. If the VA is not available, then there's no resources. And so us knowing about the veteran service organizations in our area that can help, the services that they provide, all the nonprofits that are out there, us being able to know about that helps us to bridge the gap and help them get help right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess it's a great opportunity to say we're happy to be part of your snowball too. And one of the services that we provide is a suicide risk management consultation that's free to any provider who serves veterans, and peers are included in that category of folks who serve veterans. And so if there are opportunities here for us to be part of your network of resources for your peers to consult and potentially get support around suicide risk management, we'd be happy to connect you with that resource as well.
That's awesome. I appreciate that, and I think having that, again, having you in our network is a fantastic piece, because it's the difference between somebody being in crisis, and I think that's probably the worst case scenario that we could train and prepare a mentor for. And I've had mentors tell me that's my biggest fear, is that somebody comes to me and they're at that point. So knowing that you guys are out there, there's a difference between having a 1-800 number for a crisis line that they can call and not knowing who's on the other end of the call or the text line that they have. There's a difference between that and seeing a face, knowing a name. And so that's huge. That's a huge piece, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely. So I did want to touch on one of the things you mentioned, which was that this peer program is volunteers. I had in some reason in my mind I had imagined that this was sort of a paid job, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the model of this system and how it's funded, and sort of how you all sustain yourself.
Sure, and then it's a fantastic thing, and it's sort of a protection piece. I feel on my end is that I can't tell these mentors how much we appreciate the fact that they volunteer their time, their energy, and their
that's incredible.
Their hearts
so selfless. Yeah,
it's to me it's overwhelming. So I try to take every advantage, take every opportunity I have to tell them how much we appreciate them, because I can't pay them. If I could, I would. It's amazing to me. It really is. And I guess, having been a mentor myself, I see, the reward is payment in itself. When you see somebody succeed and take that next step in their personal growth, that's rewarding enough in and of itself. But it would be fantastic if, the state provided, and they're working, they're growing that piece. We actually have the funding for contract work as peer mentors, and so we're kind of breaking into that area, of having some funds and being able to compensate somebody for their connecting the dots between somebody getting out of jail and not knowing what to do, to being able to have somebody on hand that you can call day or night and say, look, this guy needs a ride, he's got to get to a safe place, can you do this? And they're like, sure, and you're able to say and know that, hey, they're compensated for this. They're going above and beyond, yes, but there's compensation for it. So I hope that piece grows, because right now a big hearty smile and a thanks and a hug is about all I can offer, besides the us breaking into the contract piece. So hopefully that's something that grows, and I commend the state for recognizing the need there and moving some funding towards it. I think it's growing in the right direction.
Sure. And you mentioned that there's been some prior work in Buffalo, and obviously also this idea that like each court system is a little bit unique and kind of has their own way of doing this. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. There's there are districts around the major areas of the state that are doing this, and there's been a lot of autonomy. Some of the districts in the state have been around longer than others, so they've worked through it. They have more, I guess what you call boots on the ground experience with it. They've bumped their heads. They've grown in the right direction. They've figured out what to do, what not to do. And looking to the 18th has been a huge part of what we've done in the first. The first has been around for, I think, going on around 5 years.
Okay.
And then the 18th has been around, I don't know, I'm not absolutely 100% sure, so I don't want to say, but I know that they've been around longer than that.
Okay.
And so there's kind of this autonomy that's existed, for as long as these courts have been around. And we're doing our best to collaborate and to unify that statewide. That autonomy has led to some great things. In the Springs, they have a lot more funding. They're doing a lot of work with Operation TBI, and they're able to stretch out in areas that we may not be able to. But looking to what they're doing helps us to sort of emulate that in our districts as best we can. So unifying this has been a big initiative. Mike Burtis has come on down at the state level at SCAO, and he's, all of this collaboration has been sort of pushed at for a long time, but I think we're making ground that we haven't been able to make in the past. So that autonomy is good because different areas have different needs and different requirements and things that work, and all that stuff needs to be taken into account. But having some unified training for the mentors, recognizing, hey, we've been around this long, we've seen that this training might be most helpful. What do you guys think about doing that? How do we best disseminate that training and get everybody involved with it? What do you guys do that works in this area? What hasn't worked? That kind of collaboration is kind of from what I've seen. I think it's helping us to make some great strides.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really exciting to hear honestly how far you all have come from the first or early on, starting maybe a decade ago, to now, this really collaborative network building within Colorado. So I'm excited to see where it goes next.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I've dropped a couple names of folks that are really leading the initiatives, but some of the other peer mentor coordinators that I want to mention, Jennifer Smith. She's down in Colorado. She's kind of new to the position. Brian Arndt, he's in the Denver area. Scott Hefty works in the Lakewood area, and I think they're a municipal court. So we're trying to loop that in because he's been around for quite a while. Obviously, Todd in the 18th. Darnell, who's Darnell O'Hare. She's in Adams County. And so I'm sure there are names that I'm forgetting, and I apologize, but these are the folks that we've regularly kind of gotten together and regularly picked each other's brains and look out for opportunities to say, hey, I just found this resource. It's working really well. You guys might want to hang on to this. Having that kind of collaboration and having Mike come on at the state level and be able to be kind of a central hub for that, and us getting together it's exciting to me, because I really do feel like we're more powerful together. We all appreciate our ability to be autonomous and have our own flavors and styles, but at the end of the day, building this thing to be sustainable is what we're about. We want this to continue growing and to continue being effective, and that team approach, I think, is going to get us miles beyond where we would get kind of operating our own little insulated bubbles.
Yeah, so. Yeah, Joseph, I can really feel this this momentum building. This is really exciting time to hear about your work. As we start to kind of wind down, I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of share either a story or a lesson or any parting words.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I've realized is that change doesn't happen overnight, and that's kind of what we're about. That's at the base level what we're about in Veterans Treatment Court is helping folks realize change, and helping them realize that it's time for change, and so it's a process. It's not a switch that's flipped, it's not a doorway that you walk through and it's magically fixed. And a lot of us, in American society, we want that because we're all about that instant gratification and pizza delivery in 5 minutes. And it's the journey, I think, from getting from point A to point D that really strengthens recovery and the change that we're looking for when we're talking about recovery from mental health and recovery from substance use disorder. And so having that patience, and the continued desire to help, the genuine desire to help, I think is what I see from everybody I've worked with in the Veterans Treatment Court, And at the end of the day, we're about helping these folks, helping these fellow service members. It's about really helping serve those who have served, and I just feel like, I don't know, this is probably the most passionate I've ever been about anything I've ever been paid to do, and so it's a really rewarding thing, and I would encourage anybody who wants to get involved to reach out to me. I'm available and can be reached through the Jefferson County website. I'd be glad to give out my phone number. I don't know if you want to do that on the podcast.
Sure, we can absolutely leave it in the notes with the podcast and make sure folks can get in touch with you.
And email and whatever means possible. I think I want to be available to grow my network and to expand the level of help that we're getting here. And one of the things I forgot to mention is that we have a veteran pod in Jefferson County in the detention center.
Oh, okay.
And so Chief Rob Reardon has been kind of spearheaded that initiative, and that's kind of a model that we're looking at as far as, we get to go in there every week, every Tuesday after court. I go in with the veteran justice officer, the VJO, Nathan Vuitton, and the probation officer in the first, Jennifer Lockyer. And these guys are key to what we do too. There's the judicial side of things, and then there's the probation side of things, and then there's the VA side of things. But when we come together, we go into the pod, and we realize that there are folks that may not be appropriate for Veterans Treatment Court, but they're veterans and they have needs, and we know resources, and so we just want to help. We just want to help vets. Well, we want to help everybody, but we have a definite passion and a heart for helping others who have served, and so just keeping that will to help others. That's kind of what we're about. When we raise our hand and take that oath, we put our lives on the line. We write a blank check, and I don't think that's something that devotion is something that goes away when you ETS. It's something that continues, and so I would encourage anybody who wants to get involved to reach out to me. And if I'm not the right person, I'll get you in touch with the right person. But it really is a collective thing, and we always need help. We always need to grow our network, and so reach out and help us serve those who have served.
Excellent. Yeah, that's so very hard at the center. The help and serve others who have served. So I really appreciate that passion behind your work. And if there was any veteran, who potentially may be struggling or going through something, who is listening today, are there any words to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that you're better than that. You have worth. You have innate worth as a human being. Taking that step into suicide is a permanent solution to a lot of times temporary problems that can be handled, problems that there's help for, and drop the pride and reach out, and I guarantee you, on the other side of all that fear that you have, there's a life that you probably never imagined, So reach out, drop the pride, reach out, get some help, and realize that that's a very permanent solution to a lot of times temporary problems.
Well said. And as Joseph mentioned, we'll absolutely include his contact information. So that is a very real reach out. There is a person here, and Joseph, I'm in the room with him. There is some real passion there, and so if you reach out to him, we will make sure you get connected to whatever service you need.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, again, thanks so much, Joseph, for joining us today and driving through here in the snowy winter day here in Colorado. We really appreciate your time. And listeners, if you have any comments, feedback, questions, just reactions to today's podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to give us a review and let some colleagues know if you like what you hear, to share it with them. Until next time, join us for more interviews on important work in veterans' mental health, resilience, suicide prevention, and well-being. Take care, everybody.